welcome everyone. I know more people will join, but welcome to this Chicago Asthma Consortium Lunch and Learn. Um, this should be very interesting. It's a little different. It's called Drug Development and Clinical Trials. You'll hear a little more about what that involves soon and about our speaker. Next slide, please. So I'm Paul Tremblay. I'm a community clinical projects nurse in Rochester, New York. I've worked on community-based research and interventions, testing, and tweaking systems of care. I'm privileged to present this or facilitate this with you all. So thank you. Next slide, please. So the agenda, we keep it tight to make good use of people's time. The first 5 minutes, we'll go over an overview, a little bit of housekeeping things and speaker information, and then our presentation, the content will be delivered by Mr. Ali Ahmed, and time for Q&A and closing. So it should be quick. So thank you. Next slide, please. So the Chicago Asthma Consortium's mission is to improve quality of life for those with asthma in a number of different ways. Our purpose is here on this slide, and we're looking for more people concerned about asthma and patient well-being to get involved. The website is listed right there. So thank you. Next slide, please. And so the video and microphone should be off during the first part of the content part of the webinar or the session. Use the chat feature, please, to introduce yourself and say hello. So your name, the setting you work in, your role, if that's appropriate, and then put your questions into the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat, and there will definitely be time for Q&A. And then there's an evaluation afterwards. So please complete the evaluation. It helps us plan for the future and make the content meaningful to you. So thank you. Next slide, please. And there are many ways to get involved with the Chicago Asthma Consortium. So there are different committees, the advisory board, community engagement, fundraising, membership, professional development, and policy and advocacy. I'm a member of the professional development committee, and it's been a rich experience to support the work. And there's contact information right there. So thank you. Next slide. And today's speaker is Mr. Ali Ahmed. He is a clinical researcher with over 30 years of experience working in clinical trials, research, and drug development. In that industry, he founded a company called Affinity Health in 2015. He's worked for different organizations in different roles, and he's currently very committed to drug development and clinical research and has a lot of expertise to share with us. So welcome, Mr. Ahmed.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, and I will share my screen. And I hope everyone can see the screen. Please let me know. Okay, so just give me a second. So my name is Ali Ahmed, and I am as mentioned, I work in clinical research. So what is clinical research? It is the aspect of healthcare that brings new drugs to patients and to people who need them. And we work within the pharmaceutical industry, so the pharma companies that develop new medications all the time, and then conduct what are required clinical trials to prove that the new medications are safe and effective. I am a vice president with AMR Clinical. We are a company that conducts clinical trials. We have 2 locations in the Chicagoland area. One is in Niles, Illinois, as well as one in Oak Brook, Illinois. So if you are interested not only for asthma clinical trials, but we conduct many clinical trials in really every condition that you could probably think of. And we're doing a lot of obesity right now. We're doing diabetes. We're doing pain management, cardiovascular. So there's many opportunities to benefit from the process that is established to get new medicines to people who need them. So this presentation is really going to talk about that overall process. How do we get new drugs into our medicine cabinet so that we can, take them and benefit from them? So this presentation is going to really give you a high-level overview of from the time that the scientists and medical experts are investigating a new drug to the time that it's approved by the FDA. Every drug that we take in the United States is previously approved by the FDA so that it is ensured that what we are taking, if it's Advil or Tylenol to, chemotherapy, any medication has to be proven to be safe and effective in what it's supposed to do. So the FDA has an incredible amount of oversight to ensure that we get safe and effective drugs when we need them. Um, I'll talk about the major phases of within that development timeline from something that is being investigated and discovered to the time it's provided to patients, the specific clinical trials. So part of that process is to run programs that will provide those medications that have been developed to patients to ensure that they are as effective as they're supposed to be. And I always say that, every drug, like I said, we've ever taken or anyone you know has ever taken has gone through this process. And then we'll talk in summary about some of the specifics about asthma clinical trials. So really kind of the key idea of this presentation is to think about from the time it's developed in the lab to the time that you're taking it, there's a huge process and a lot of regulatory and government oversight to ensure that what we're getting is safe and effective. So, in a big picture, from that discovery to what's called an NDA, the new drug application, that's when the pharma company now takes all that data it generated over many years, provides it to the FDA, that they have medical experts, scientific experts that review it and ensure that it's then approved. So, that process can take many years. And as you can see on my slide in these colorful circles, a discovery of a new drug, that process to even discover it can take, anywhere from 2 to 5 years. And why so much? Because they can discover that something could work, a new chemical structure, a new entity, but they have to be able to manufacture it. They have to be able to test it in many, many different aspects to see that it's really something that could work. From there, in the orange circle, it goes to a phase that's called preclinical or before it goes into humans. And that is a process, again, that they're looking at cellular models, animal models to ensure that the pharmacology of the drug, how is the drug working within a organism, is effective, that it's not producing any, negative potential effects. So that whole process then leads up to this, I guess it's dark blue or black circle, which is all of that data before it even goes into humans is submitted to the government, the FDA, and they review it and discuss it with the pharma company or biotechnology company that has developed this to really ensure that everything is approved before it and humans get an opportunity to take the drug. So that's a shorter process to just review everything. Then really the core is how all of you can participate in this process, which is the clinical side. So there are 3 phases of a drug going through this process to ensure, again, that the drug is safe. It could be a drug, a device, a vaccine, that it's safe and it's effective. And that process can take anywhere from, multiple years in terms of the number of clinical trials that are being run, the length of those trials. There are some that will last 3 months. There are others that'll last 5 years. So it really just depends on the condition and the drug that's being analyzed at this stage of its development process. So once all of that data is generated from the many patients that get access to that medication, then it goes into another application to the government, which is called the new drug application. And that occurs, and that review can take, a few months, a number of months. And if approved, physicians get access to it. Drug stores get access to it, type of thing, and we're able to, use that drug. Now, even not to complicate this any further, but even after approval of a medication, there's always work being done to see if there are other conditions that drug could work. Or let's say that the drug was approved, a diabetes drug to treat patients with diabetes, but it was only approved for people who are adults, 18 and above. they would run separate clinical trials basically to see if they can, you know, see if the drug is effective and safe for a younger population in this example, or many different types of phase 4 trials occur to see the benefits. It could be a drug that was approved for one condition, but they realized that, hey, this could work for something totally different. And that is also the case. And I can give you examples of that. So again, the takeaway,
Severity.
I'm sorry, can everyone hear me?
Yes, yes, go
Okay.
ahead.
So again, to summarize, there's three stages here: a preclinical application to the FDA called the IND, the post-clinical trial application for final approval, and that's called the new drug application. And then kind of this reality check to make sure that, there are additional work that needs to be done even after the drug is approved. So, people think about this. How much does it cost to get a new drug? And the main takeaway from this slide is it's very expensive. There is a lot of money that goes into this process. It's all kind of behind the scenes, right? All of us who have different conditions or needs and take different medications, we just go and get the medication we need. We never really think about the fact that it took years and a lot of resources to develop a new drug. And so this just highlights that, it's really very expensive. And the average can be, in the hundreds of millions of dollars that are there, that the pharma companies, the biotechnology companies, et cetera, invest into getting a drug through this process before it can be, sold and prescribed. So why do clinical trials matter? And so I think it's intuitive that they matter because this is how we get new drugs. It's not only for the obvious, which is there's a condition where there is no medication, there is no treatment. I know, recently there is now a treatment for sickle cell anemia, but a few years back, we worked on a program, a clinical trial that at that time there was no cure. There are many forms of cancer that there is obviously, a ton of research going to develop a better chemotherapy, a better treatment. So many conditions are anxiously awaiting, people who have those conditions are anxiously awaiting for the results of this development program to get new drugs to the market. In addition, even something as common as, again, obesity. Right now, there's so much work being done, as many of you know, to develop medications to help people lose weight. And so it could be that it's an unmet need, or there are medications out there, but they're looking at better medications. Better medications meaning they act longer. You don't have to take as much of the medication to get the effect. They're safer, less side effects. So even in very common conditions where there's already many medications available, the research community is still investigating, developing new medications to help people with their condition. So why then, when a clinical trial starts, when we're at that phase of development, why should a patient, a person who has that condition, participate in a clinical trial? And there are some risks, but there are also some benefits. The initial is the medication being developed. Again, there's a whole process which I'll go through, phase 1, 2, and 3. We first look at the safety of a drug, then we look at the effectiveness, but safety is first. But we always realize, like even drugs that are approved, drugs that we take every day, there are side effects. You may take a drug and you're prone to headaches, or you're prone to other, reactions of taking that drug, upset stomach. But you take the drug because it helps you in this much bigger way. So in the similar sense, there are some, minor side effects and side effects that you could experience. You have to be involved in this process. So you have to see the doctor regularly during the time you're on a clinical trial. You have to provide them a lot of information. So it's not just a physical exam or blood work or things you normally do when you visit a doctor, imaging, MRI, X-ray, but we need your feedback. So we are asking for what are called patient-reported outcomes. How are you feeling? How, does it hinder in your ability to have a normal day and things that we ask you to give us feedback in addition. So there is time that you have to spend. The treatment that is being developed, again, this is a medication that we're evaluating. So it may not work as effectively as we hope it will. And so you may not see the therapeutic benefit that you are hoping for. But that's why we're doing these to confirm that this drug is effective enough that physicians will prescribe it. You may be on a clinical trial and get a placebo, and many people do ask this question. And really, why, when you're on a clinical trial, some patients get the actual drug and some get a placebo, which is basically if it's an oral tablet you're taking, it's like a tablet with nothing in it. And that's because what we're trying to test and find out is if a person was not getting any therapy, what is the benefit for those who get it? Like, what is the extent of the benefit? And like I said, many conditions, there is no treatment. So so we have to evaluate people who are not getting the benefit, the drug. Um, how does that compare to those that are? So there are a lot of safety mechanisms in place. There's a lot of benefits that I'll go into, even if you are on a trial and getting a placebo, that this is just a requirement that the FDA and the research community has to abide by is setting up a clinical trial in this way. Not every trial is that, set up where you may get a placebo. Some are called comparator trials, where they will test the existing therapy. So half the patients, as an example, will get what's already marketed, what you already may be taking or would take for that condition, versus the new therapy. So there's many different types of therapies, but there is this risk that you may be on a placebo. There is, like I said, that you have to come into the clinic. It could be once a week for a period of time, once a month. And so obviously it may impact your normal schedule during that process. The benefits are quite a few. Again, you work with a board certified, medical licensed, very experienced physician. And so you get regular checkups, you get access to this treatment that isn't available to the general population yet. So that's a benefit. Again, you get to treat your symptoms. You help the process, which is to get new medications to all patients. And so many patients that I've worked with over the years are really very interested and very kind of proud of the fact that they're involved in this process. And then trials, they reimburse you for your time. Participation in a clinical trial, you are not required to pay anything for this. We do no submission to insurance or any of that type of thing, no paying out of pocket. In fact, you get reimbursed for your time. And I'm saying here some trials, really most trials, will actually reimburse you for the time that you're spending on the clinical trials, attending the visits or filling out the questionnaires and forms. So again, the benefits are there. The extent of the benefits are never in essence guaranteed. And really, if there is a situation where there's some minor side effects or you just don't have the time to do the study, it's in your control and in the physician's control to say, look, I think we should stop the study. It's either not benefiting you or there are other issues. So there's a lot of control with you and your doctor. So now we're going to go through those phases of clinical. So once that IND is approved, that the preclinical work is approved, now we go into the clinical trial part of developing a new drug or vaccine. So there are phases. The first phase for every drug is we start with safety. So if you think about it, if someone, again, there's a lot of drugs being developed for asthma right now. There are drugs being developed to reduce weight. Uh, and even a combination of the two, by the way. So, but first, before we ever ran the clinical trial that you would consider for yourself, there were previous clinical trials that really started with people who were basically healthy, did not have the condition. They were just taking the drug at very, very low levels to see that the drug was safe. And there are hospitals, multitude of them around the country, here in Chicago, that actually have what are called clinical pharmacology units that run these trials. And so it's typically a healthy volunteer to take this for a short period of time. at a very low level, that the only way that it would affect their health is they see kind of their blood work and they realize that there's some risk or concerns, and so they stop it. So it doesn't really affect them. They have no real symptoms per se, typically, and the study then won't go forward into any further development. But for those that pass this, again, all government required, then we go to the next phase. So these are, several months, only safety. We're not looking at how effective these drugs are. And if there's any concerns, it's stopped right there. So by the time it really goes to a clinical trial that requires actual patients, safety has already by and large been determined. So we know that the drug is safe. Now the next two phase 2 and 3, are really looking at how effective they are. And so again, these are who would join, or several hundred people would potentially be required who have the actual condition. It could be several months that the trial runs to a couple years. Again, now we're always still assessing safety. Every trial does. It's just that the first phase is only safety, but now we're also looking at how effective it is. So if you, again, have asthma or COPD or any of the conditions as I've mentioned, you enroll on a clinical trial, and now we're actually starting to really hope and see that the drug is working. And why does it matter? Because again, this is really where the patient benefit we start to see. Those companies that have developed the drugs, the owners of these drugs, they put a lot of effort to get to this point. And so everyone is really excited and hopeful that this actually works. And so again, we're looking at if the drug is working, what is the maximum tolerated dose? So we're trying to get to that point where, okay, this is the best dose to treat this severity of the condition. So again, if you have mild asthma or moderate or severe, as your doctor has told you, it's a different dose that you have to take, right? And the doctor knows after meeting you and doing a physical what dose to give you. That knowledge that the physician has comes from these trials, because the data will tell the physician, okay, this is the best dose for this severity of disease. So then after that phase 2, you go to phase 3. Phase 3 is an extension of phase 2, where now we know that maximum tolerated dose. We know that the drug is safe. Now what we are looking at is long term. The patient may be on this drug for the rest of their life, or they may be on this drug, for years or months, or maybe just a few days. But whatever it is, this is where the research industry determines again, is the drug safe at long-term exposure? Is the drug safe at this amount of medication you have to take? Is the drug safe compared to at that longer term exposure compared to existing medications that are already approved and being prescribed by physicians? So there's all of this work that's being done. So phase 3 could be multiple clinical trials. It could be one trial. It could be 10 trials that the FDA, that the government tells the pharma company, you have to run these trials before we will even consider your drug. So again, this is really a collaboration, but a requirement between the FDA, our government healthcare regulatory agency, and the drug development industry that develops the drugs to do what the FDA is asking us to do, to prove that the drug is safe and to prove that the drug is effective in the various, aspects of the patient population, young, old, different, severity of the condition, different lifestyle, different, health, that how can they benefit from the drug if they are, got other conditions that could really hinder the effectiveness of the drug. So there's so much that goes into getting as much information that the doctor, when they're in the patient room with you, are able to have the data to know how best to treat you. And as I said, even after the drug is approved and it's, being prescribed, the pharma company in the background is still running clinical trials sometimes, many times, to do longer term safety, to look at real world. How is it really being used in the real world? And that could be, look, in this segment of the country, they're taking the drug, but their diet is really weighted taking a lot of carbohydrates or a lot of protein or a lot of sugar. And really long term, how is it really working with that drug, their lifestyle, their condition, their, exposure to external elements, so many different factors that the pharma company and the physicians want to know long term so that they may have to adjust how they treat the patient based on external conditions or external issues. So these can go months to years after launch, which means launch meaning approval, that the drug is now approved. Again, it's ongoing work just to ensure that we have more and more data. The pharma and companies and the scientists, the physicians don't just stop when a drug is approved. They're always looking in the background to make sure that the drugs we're taking are effective, safe. And then so really, again, what happens in this phase is we just keep learning and we keep then adjusting if we need to adjust. And that's sometimes you hear a more improved medication comes out. And that's because of this type of data. So let's talk for a minute about the benefits of how patients, people who participate in the clinical trial do benefit, because there are many benefits that I only briefly alluded to in the previous slide. So, number one, when you have this condition, you may or may not be able to see a doctor regularly. You may or may not, have enough information on your own condition. So being a part of a clinical trial, you get so much more information about your health. You get so much more interaction with physicians who are so experienced in this treatment of people who have this condition. So that is really a benefit. You get more information, as I said. You get a chance to be on a medication before it's actually available. I often use the example of COVID, that when we were all anxiously awaiting for the COVID vaccine, there were about 70,000 people in the country that got potentially access to it earlier because they were participating in the clinical trials that ran before we got the approval. So it's really an opportunity to, benefit. It's an opportunity to learn about yourself and be a part of this process. So now let's talk a little bit. I've just got a couple slides about asthma. So, what is the work being done? As you know, there are many inhalers out there, many biologics that are already available to you. But as a patient that or that you yourself, those medications may not be 100% effective, or they may have other issues that you have to deal with. So what I'm here to tell you is there's a lot of work being done. There's over a dozen probably that I can think of off the top of my head, and maybe more, different pharma and biotech companies that are actively looking at better medications to help you. And so what is being done? Everything from inhaled therapies to test faster relief, fewer exacerbations, better steroid delivery, easier to use combination inhalers are all being tested. Different biologics and targeted medicines are being tested, so that, we're looking at getting benefit to you earlier, longer, faster, etc. A lot of work in younger people who are suffering with asthma. As I said, a lot of the real world, just to see how external factors, allergies, and other things are being affected. And so, there's so many questions that people ask about this. Do they reduce attacks? Again, if you're on a clinical trial and you are on the medication, that there's a great potential that it could be reducing the number of asthmatic attacks. Because as I said, that these drugs are being developed to be safer, to be better than what's available. So hopefully it's working. Do they improve lung function? Can they reduce oral steroid use? Again, yes. I mean, many of these trials, that is the goal. And which patients would benefit most? I think that I may not know the exact example, and maybe Paul and others do, but there's many drugs that are really focused on those who are really have severe conditions. And so I think that there's a lot of focus on that. And sorry for the little formatting, but why is asthma a good example? Because again, this could be a cardiovascular slide. I'm talking about heart disease. I'm talking about cancer. I could talk about, dermatology and acne. That whatever the drug and the area that we're working on, asthma is a good example because many conditions have different severity of disease. You can have very mild symptoms. You could have, as they say, moderate or more severe symptoms. So it's a good example of the fact that there's a lot of work to address your medical needs. And again, what do these trials measure? So if you're enrolled on an asthma clinical trial, we're looking at your lung function. So we're having you do the pulmonary function test. We're looking at the severity of those flare-ups that you have. We're looking daily at the symptoms that you are experiencing, from the daily and overnight. We're testing you for different biomarkers to see, especially for those who have more specific types of asthma. Again, for severe asthma, a major goal is trying to reduce the oral corticoid or steroid exposure. So we're looking at that. And as I said, safety is never not prioritized. We're looking at the reactions to getting injections. We're looking at any issues of potential infections, other adverse events that we want to make sure. So the benefit, one of the many benefits of being on a clinical trial as an asthma patient is you have access to some of the top physicians regularly and just generally to ask any question you want, to take a look at how your health is progressing, hopefully benefiting, through the clinical trial that can be typically months to a couple of years long. So it's a good amount of time you have this type of direct access. Now, the next few slides I'm not going to go through in detail, but it is just to give you a flavor of, and this is all public knowledge, it's all publicly available, of the many clinical trials that are currently being run. So that means that drugs have been developed, they've passed the IND phase, they're in clinical trials, and at various stages, they could be very close to being submitted to the FDA and then being available to you and your doctor. Or they're earlier in the phase, so it may still be a couple years away. But as I said, looking at population focused, looking at people with inadequately controlled asthma, those that are on maintenance therapy, how are they, handling the medication? So there's a number of these trials and the different phases, as I mentioned, typically 2 and 3. So all of these that I'm mentioning, of safety has been established. Now we're looking at how effective and kind of even where they are in the process that I've highlighted here. And I can always come back to it if you have a question, and a number of other ones. And by no means have I captured all of the trials. These are just some of the ones that I brought up to, highlight how much work is being done. I thought it would be interesting to mention this one, the second one in the row. You've all probably heard, and the big term right now is GLP, and that's the type of medication that's being extensively looked at and already drugs available to reduce your weight. So here's an example of they're looking at, the fact that many people with asthma cannot be as physically active, gain weight. So they're looking at the fact that medications that reduce those symptoms to give you a better quality of life, even though you may obviously still suffer from the disease or have, other symptoms, but many studies looking at your quality of life as well as the treatment of the condition. So I'm at my last slide, and to give you a few takeaways from this presentation, number one, what is a drug development? There's two main goals: is to get to the IND, where you do all of the preclinical before it ever gets into human type data that we need to establish this has really strong potential and is as safe as we believe it will be when we do start testing people with it. And then the NDA that incorporates with the data from the IND all of the clinical data that we generate. That's submitted to the government, and the government looks at it and says, yes, it's approved, or no, you have to do more studies, or just stop because we don't see a benefit. We talked about phase 1, which is really that initial clinical trial where people who are basically healthy take the same drug that you would be taking later as an patient with asthma, just to see safety at very low levels at hospitals that many of you know are very well in the Chicagoland area and around the country that run trials like this. Clinical trials as a whole matter because they improve care, they protect safety, They generate evidence that can be more equitable and more representative of real patients. When we run a clinical trial, we try to understand like the diversity required, like, understanding that we can't just focus on one type of individual. We have to look at where they live. We have to look at the individuals in terms of their diverse profiles so that everyone gets it. We get data that can really help doctors know how to treat you. And that's really what's important. Drug development is slow, it is expensive, and there are some of the risks I mentioned that you would have to face like you would if you were taking even medications that are approved, but this is part of the process. And asthma is a very strong example to highlight the fact that there are many different types of trials from inhalers, biologics, looking at your quality of life. And it's a great opportunity for those who have the condition, are suffering, to get more involved in your own care and to have experts help you with those symptoms that you're facing. So I do want to thank you for the time that you've given me to speak, and I'm available to answer questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Ali. It's a complex process that all of us may not appreciate, and it's very rigorous. So thank you so much for explaining it well. I don't know, Rochelle, if there's time for questions, but maybe if there's a burning question or two while Ali's here, someone could unmute and put that forth.
Being that my pharmacy background and learning about all these things from my earliest days, one of the things about placebo effect is the effect of the shape and the color of the product, because there is a psychological impact that people can perceive. It's like, oh, this looks like it's really going to do something for me. So that's got to be differentiated when you're evaluating the people who have not been on the placebo to see if there's any effect on the product being delivered. Regarding the following study having to do with gender differences, I'm very involved with the fact that comorbidities vary between the genders, metabolism varies between the genders, hormones, everything. And old studies used to be predominantly all male, and therapies, even workup diagnoses, have been incorrect because they're looking at older research based on all male research. One doctor I know said a male doctor, after seeing a patient 4 times in the emergency room in a single visit, gave up and was contacting this female ER specialist. She goes in, she goes, she's having a heart attack because women don't present the same. So it becomes very critical in these studies. There should also be a differentiation in responses of the therapy based on gender, not just based on overall success, and appropriate dosing based on their gender also.
I actually want to thank you for highlighting a couple things that I missed. So absolutely correct. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Any other questions? I know that we went over by 9 minutes, so I want to still give Ali an opportunity to answer any burning question that people have.
And then while waiting for if there are any final questions, again, if anyone is interested, be it asthma or any other condition, please contact me. I've put up the slide with my phone number and email. And again, our company has 2 clinics in Chicago, excellent physicians. Would love to, just provide you information, knowledge, or opportunity to participate.
Thank you so much, Ali. Oh, Paul, you have a question?
No. I was just going to thank you as well. This is a complex topic to explain succinctly, and I really appreciate you very much.
Thank you all. And please take time to fill out the evaluation. I put the link in the chat. And I, again, want to thank you all for taking time to join us today. And I'm happy to give you back some of your time. I mean, I'm not giving you back, but because we took 10 minutes over.
Apologize for being a few minutes over.
But we appreciate all of you, and you have a lovely day. Bye, everyone.